Welcome to the deep dive. So today we're digging into something really interesting based on this book, Business in the Ghetto. We're looking at how thriving businesses, entrepreneurial ecosystems, can actually emerge in urban areas that
Yeah,
maybe get overlooked or, well, misunderstood.
exactly. And this book gives us a really specific framework. It's not just looking at hardship. It's about understanding the dynamics, the actual business dynamics, in what the author terms ghetto neighborhoods, specifically in an African urban context.
Right. So our mission today is really to pull out the key insights from this source. What makes these economies tick? What are the opportunities? And what kind of unique business approaches actually work there? We want to give you, the listener, maybe a deeper feel for this whole ecosystem.
Yeah, fresh perspective. And it gets interesting right away. The author starts by talking about different kinds of education needed for success, not just academics. He really emphasizes real-life financial education.
Which straight away tells you this is going to be practical, right? Ground level stuff. Okay, so let's kick things off there. How does the author define ghetto in this context? What makes it distinct from, say, affluent or suburban areas?
Well, it's interesting. He sets up this contrast.
Yep.
Affluent, suburban, and then ghetto.
Mm-hmm.
And the definition isn't purely about poverty level, so that's part of it. It's really framed as the main landing spot for people migrating from rural areas.
Mm-hmm.
People looking for those greener pastures, seeking opportunities in the city. So it becomes this sort of first stop, a hub.
And it's characterized by more than just who lives there, isn't it? The physical side seems key in the book. We're talking high population density, often real challenges with infrastructure like basic sanitation, decent roads, housing quality. Things can be stretched thin.
Definitely. High density and infrastructure strain are big markers. And there's this perception, often, that it's temporary. People arrive, plan to make some money, send it back home to the village, maybe eventually leave. That's the common idea.
But the book pushes back on that a bit.
It does. It argues that while that's true for some, for many others, these areas become home long-term. And that shift towards longer-term settlement is what actually fuels a distinct local economy. An economy focused squarely on the daily needs of the residents.
So even if they're seen as poor areas, the sheer number of people creates a market.
Precisely. That's a central point.
Mm-hmm.
Despite the challenges, the concentration of people means a constant demand for basics: food, clothes, shelter, even entertainment. So, counterintuitively perhaps, these areas generate significant economic activity day in, day out.
Okay, that's fascinating. So if the activity is there, how do people actually tap into it? What's the strategy the book outlines?
The core principle is pretty straightforward, actually. It's about smart, observant individuals seeing the problems caused by that density and figuring out ways to solve them locally. They leverage the population concentration itself. They see the needs right in front of them and turn that into an income source.
And the book gives concrete examples, right? Not just theory.
Oh yeah, very concrete. It talks about businesses targeting those fundamental needs we just mentioned. Think about vendors selling affordable food, small shops for clothing or basic furniture, places offering alcohol or local entertainment. These are staples.
And it links back to those infrastructure issues, too.
Absolutely. That's where some of the really insightful examples come in, like tackling the housing shortage. The author mentions people creating low-cost housing structures. But not just basic shelters, sometimes incorporating things like small solar setups for electricity, maybe finding ways to provide running water, or building shared but decent toilet facilities.
Especially near places with lots of workers.
Exactly. Near industrial areas, warehouses, construction sites, places with malls maybe being built. You get these populations of temporary workers who need somewhere affordable to stay, and entrepreneurs step in to provide that specific type of housing. Often very practical, low-cost structures.
Right, meeting a very specific need for that group, and it goes beyond just housing.
Yes, it extends to other essential services for the working population. Things like rental properties at rates people can actually afford, or setting up local taxi or transport services, maybe on a contract basis for commuters, or just for daily trips, reliable ways to get around.
Makes sense. What else?
Even things like daycare. If people are working, they need childcare. So setting up small daycare facilities, sometimes with little playgrounds attached. Again, it's about observing the rhythm of daily life and seeing the gaps.
So the underlying message seems to be about really seeing what's going on.
Pretty much. Keen observation. Understanding the daily grind, the needs, the wants, even the small desires of the residents. That's where the business ideas come from.
And then managing it properly. The book mentions finances.
Yeah, it makes a point about financial management, even at a basic level, like
Mm.
the importance of opening a bank account. It sounds simple, but it's presented as a key step to manage income better, maybe save up, and potentially grow or expand the business later. It professionalizes things a bit.
It connects the dots between identifying need and actually building something sustainable.
Exactly. And there's an aspirational element, too, which is interesting. The book notes that most residents want better living conditions. They desire reliable electricity, decent housing with proper toilets, maybe even Wi-Fi access these days.
Things many people take for granted.
Right. And that desire itself, the book suggests, is another layer of opportunity. For entrepreneurs who can figure out how to provide those improved standards or steps towards them in an affordable way within that context.
So this really reframes the whole idea of the ghetto, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. The book argues strongly against seeing it just as a place of poverty or problems. Instead, it presents it as a dynamic economic zone. It has its own rules, its own logic, but it's humming with activity and, crucially, with opportunities.
Driven by necessity, maybe, but also by ingenuity.
Ingenuity and resourcefulness, definitely. It's about finding solutions within the existing constraints, tailored specifically to that environment.
And those tailored solutions can be really successful precisely because they fit the context so well. It flips the script from focusing only on what's missing.
Exactly. It highlights the potential that's already there, inherent in the situation.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. What are the main takeaways from this deep dive into business in the ghetto?
Well, I think the biggest one is that these neighborhoods, despite hardship, are not economic dead zones. Far from it. They're vibrant, complex economies, even if often informal. They're driven fundamentally by population density and all the unmet needs that come with it.
And the key to business success there, according to the book?
It really boils down to understand that local context deeply, observing life, identifying the real problems and needs, and then providing practical, affordable solutions. It's context-specific entrepreneurship.
Right. Really understanding the customer, essentially, in a very concentrated setting. Okay, that leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. Thinking about these principles, identifying needs in a dense population, finding low-cost but high-value ways to meet them, how could those ideas apply elsewhere? Maybe in context, even if they don't fit this specific ghetto definition, what assumptions about overlooked markets or communities, maybe even in your own area, might need a second look based on this?
Yeah. Where else is high density creating unmet needs that maybe aren't being seen?
Something to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
We often think of, economic hubs as these gleaming downtown districts. But what if some really dynamic stuff is happening in places we tend to overlook?
That's exactly what we're digging into today. We've got some fascinating material submitted by a listener, excerpts from Iki Mukuvi's Business in the Ghetto. It really asks you to set aside the usual ways we think about commerce.
Totally. And we're not just listing the problems. We want to unpack the, frankly, ingenious ways businesses operate and even thrive in these, let's call them, unique urban settings.
Great. Places where land rights are temporary, maybe, and your neighbors are your best security system.
Exactly. And how do you even scale the business when you've got such high population density? We'll also get into this idea of education meaning much more than just, school.
Our mission here is really to pull out the key insights. What are the actual economic realities in these places? And, are there lessons about business that apply more broadly?
Okay, let's start with the landscape itself, that the Torn source calls the ghetto. It's key to understand these are often high-density areas, maybe underserved, and land ownership is just fundamentally different.
Yeah, that's a huge point Mukuva makes. The land usually belongs to the government.
Which directly impacts building anything permanent.
Absolutely. The author points out, unless the local authorities have actually surveyed the area, putting up a solid, permanent structure is, well, it's a big risk.
Why sink all that money into a building if you're not even sure you can stay there long term?
Exactly. It fosters this feeling of it being a temporary place, as you said.
So how does that shape business strategy? I mean, you can't really plan for, the next generation taking over the family shop in the same building, can you?
It means you kind of have to be nimble, focus more on the here and now, maybe shorter-term returns. Long-term planning looks different.
Okay. But then there's the other side, the high population density. You mentioned a paradox there.
Yeah, it's interesting. The source notes that density can mean more risk, like theft is a real concern.
Makes sense. More people, more anonymity sometimes.
But That same density is your market. It's a huge pool of potential customers, all packed together.
Ah, okay. Risk and opportunity side by side. So, without strong formal security, how do businesses cope with that risk?
That's where community comes in.
Yeah.
It's absolutely crucial. The text really hammers this home. You have to build strong relationships with the people around you.
So your neighbors become your, informal security detail.
In a very real way, yes. It's about trust, mutual support. When the official systems aren't quite there, this social capital isn't just nice to have, it's foundational. It is the security.
Wow. Social capital as actual tangible capital.
Mm.
That's powerful. And you also mentioned lower rental prices in the source.
Right. The text links that to the lower average earnings in the area, so it's cheaper to rent space, which lowers overheads.
But it also tells you something about the customer's spending power.
Precisely. It's a trade-off.
And then there's the whole formal side. Business registration, getting loans, attracting investors.
It sounds like these areas can operate a bit outside the usual systems.
That's a major hurdle. If the area isn't officially surveyed or recognized, registering a business is tough.
Which naturally makes investors nervous.
Very. They're clear legal structures, collateral. Banks, too, are often hesitant. They see higher risk, maybe no formal assets to back a loan.
Okay, so given all that, the land issues, the security paradox, the formal hurdles, how do businesses actually manage to grow, to scale up? The source had that plant analogy.
Yeah, the business as a plant needing water, nutrients, consistent input to grow. It's a good image.
And the source argues that the density, despite the risks, can actually help with scaling. How does that work?
Well, think about it practically. Say you're selling food at a busy taxi rank. High density means a constant stream of people, right?
Okay, yeah. Built-in foot traffic.
So scaling might just mean setting up another stall at another busy spot, train some staff. You're tapping into that existing density again. Right. So replicate what works where the people are.
Exactly. Same for, say, taxi services. Lots of people need rides. Buy another taxi, hire a driver, or room rentals if people need affordable places to live and you find a good spot.
You build more rooms, you meet the demand that's right there.
You got it. The main trigger for scaling, then, is pretty simple. Demand is outstripping your current supply. You constantly have more customers than you can serve.
That's the signal.
That's the signal. And the text also brings up competition in an interesting way.
Yeah, that idea that competitors should somehow boost your own profits. How does that compute?
Well, it's maybe less about direct contribution and more that a healthy market should have enough room for several players to do well. Sometimes competition even grows the whole pie, pushes everyone to be better.
Okay, that makes more sense. Now, the source pivots a bit, talks about the sheer reality of doing business. Uses that metaphor of swimming in a long river.
Right, the choice. Keep swimming or give up. Persevere or fold.
And then it really digs into education, questioning if just academic learning is enough. This part really struck me. It seems navigating this kind of business world takes more than just grit.
Definitely. Mukwege argues that the skills needed aren't always what you learn in school. Our usual focus on grades and degrees. Well, it might not fully prepare you for the practicalities of actually building something from scratch.
Like trading your time for a paycheck versus building real independence.
Mm-hmm. And that's where these 5 types of education come in. Academic is one, sure.
Reading, writing, arithmetic, the basics we get in school.
Then financial education, learning how money works, how to manage it, which isn't a one-off. It's ongoing, practical.
Okay. Then personal education.
That's about finding your own innate talents, your gifts. The source suggests these are like signals we need to tune into early on.
Which might explain why someone with a PhD in, history ends up running a successful bakery. Their real talent wasn't academic history.
Could be. Then there's marketplace education. This seems really key in the source.
What exactly is that?
It's the street smarts, basically. Learning by doing. Buying, selling, negotiating, actually operating in the market. The text even says employers often value this more than just a certificate. It's that real-world experience.
Yeah, you hear that all the time. Experience required.
It's why someone who never finished formal school might build a huge business. Their marketplace MBA was earned on the ground.
And the 5th one, religious or spiritual education.
Yeah, tied to your upbringing, your values, your ethics, how you treat people, how you conduct yourself in business.
So the argument is running a business is hard because it's fundamentally practical, and our education often isn't.
That seems to be the core idea. It's a practical subject we don't always learn formally.
Which circles back to financial education being so vital. Learn it early, avoid costly mistakes later.
Absolutely. Now, the last part we looked at was assets and liabilities, specifically in this context.
Right. Simple definitions. Assets make you money, liabilities cost you money. But the examples given were really tailored to the environment.
And the core strategy is clear. Build assets consistently. Over 5, 10, 15 years, create income streams that work even when you're not actively working.
So what counts as a key asset in this context, according to the source? Land is first.
Yes, prime property. Its value tends to go up partly because, well, they're not making any more of it, especially in dense areas.
Basic economics of scarcity, then buildings.
Right. Renting them out provides passive income, and owning buildings is often seen as a sign of, making it real wealth.
Okay, and then livestock. That was interesting.
Yeah. Described as real wealth, a sign of maturity. And vital for the local food economy, supplying meat, it shows how interconnected things are.
It really does. What else?
Gardening, planting fruits and vegetables, supplying local markets, maybe even supermarkets, that's an asset.
Makes sense. And finally,
Established businesses, especially larger ones, employing, say, 500 plus people, the source notes, potential tax advantages there, and just general investments in other profitable ventures that bring in money passively.
okay, so let's try and wrap this up, this deep dive. It showed a really complex picture. Businesses in these often ignored areas face unique hurdles, land rights, formal recognition.
Big ones, but also incredible resourcefulness, using community as security, using density to scale in smart ways.
This broader view of education, needing practical skills, financial literacy, not just academics, plus the focus on building tangible, locally relevant assets.
Yeah, the main takeaway for me is that economic potential isn't confined to shiny office towers. It's everywhere, often where we don't expect it. Understanding the specific rules of the game in different places gives you a much richer view of how economies actually work.
It really does. So thinking about all this community as capital scaling in dense areas, those specific assets like livestock or gardens, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What overlooked spaces or maybe unconventional approaches might hold untapped potential right where you are?
What really counts as an asset in your own context? How important are those community connections?
Lots to think about. Thanks so much for bringing this source material to us. It's been incredibly insightful. You know that feeling. You've got this great business idea. You're fired up, ready to go. But then the reality of actually making it work day in, day out just feels huge.
Oh, absolutely. It's something pretty much every entrepreneur bumps up against. The passion gets you started, sure, but, well, juggling the practical side, keeping the lights on, especially when resources are tight, that's the real challenge.
And that's exactly what we're diving into today. We're digging into the strategies from EKMU Covey's Chapter 3, Business in the Ghetto.
Right.
Now, okay, the title points to a specific context, but the business ideas in there, they're really fundamental, universal almost.
Exactly. It doesn't matter where you are. These principles apply. MU Covey's gets right to the core of what helps a small business succeed or what causes it to struggle.
Think of this as getting some key insights into business management, useful whether you're, launching an app or running a local coffee shop.
Yeah, we're talking about really understanding your money, the power of putting profits back into the business, and, crucially, having that long-term vision, seeing beyond just next week.
So our aim here is to pull out those really practical, actionable bits.
Yeah.
Things that can help any small business build a stronger foundation, avoid some common mistakes.
Give you a bit of a shortcut, maybe, to building something that lasts.
Okay, let's jump in. MUKUVE starts right off with financial education. Says it's like the absolute base. And he uses a powerful analogy. Cash flow is the lifeblood of the business.
And that's just so critical, isn't it? It's fundamentally true. If money isn't flowing right, if more is going out than coming in consistently,
Then the business just weakens.
right, it eventually fails. He really hammers home the need to constantly know your assets, what brings money in versus your expenses and liabilities, what takes money out. It's like a constant health check.
So it's way more than just counting sales. It's about knowing exactly where every pound, every dollar is going, make sure the inflow is bigger than the outflow. And the big takeaway here, it seems, is you just have to develop that skill, that discipline of tracking everything. Income, outgoings, no guesswork allowed.
Precisely. You can't afford to guess. And, well, that flows right into the next point. Building wealth by focusing on assets, not just spending.
Okay.
MUKUVE makes this really clear distinction. Own things that generate income for the business. And at the same time, you've got to be ruthless about cutting unnecessary spending, things that don't add to the bottom line or future growth.
Yeah, that just makes sense. More things working for you, making money, the stronger you are. He even links this to scaling up, right? Like opening more branches.
Exactly. More branches mean more assets generating more revenue. It's that growth engine. It's about creating lasting value, not just spending for today.
Right.
And then he shifts gears a bit, talks about business cycles, the ups and downs. He calls it the seasons of plenty and loss.
That really resonated. I mean, every business owner knows this feeling, right? The busy periods, then the quiet times.
For sure. And he uses that biblical analogy of Joseph in Egypt, storing grain during the good years.
To prepare for the famine years.
Yeah, it's such a timeless piece of advice. Simple, but so important. When things are going well, when the profits are rolling in, you absolutely must save and invest a good chunk of it.
Not to spend it all.
No, it's not about hoarding, it's smart preparation. Because the leaner times will come. It's inevitable.
So you have that buffer, that safety net, to keep going when things slow down. The action point is crystal clear. Prioritize saving. Don't get caught spending everything the moment it lands.
And related to that resilience idea, he uses another analogy, a dam with a pipe, to talk about multiple income streams.
Ah, okay, I remember this one. The dam is the business.
Right. And if there's only one pipe bringing water in, only one source of revenue,
It's risky. Very risky if that pipe gets blocked or dries up.
the whole dam, the whole business is in trouble. So the solution is obvious, really. You need to actively build several different ways for money to come in.
Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Classic advice. But crucial. If one area struggles, the others can hopefully carry you through. Makes the whole thing much stronger.
Definitely. Now, MUKUVE has a really interesting layer here, almost an ethical one. He talks about stewardship.
Stewardship. How so?
Well, the idea is that the business's resources aren't truly yours. You're holding them in trust, almost. Maybe even for a higher purpose, depending on your view.
Interesting perspective. Does he suggest how to manage that?
He actually proposes a specific allocation. It's quite structured, something like 10% for partnerships or supporting other businesses, 10% for charity, at least 30% for savings and investment, and then the biggest chunk, 50%, plowed right back into the business itself.
Wow, that's quite prescriptive. 10, 50. It's a very holistic view, isn't it? Thinking about the business, the future, and the community.
It is, and he even suggests, quite intriguingly, that following this kind of principle can lead to, well, unexpected positive results. Like there's a sort of karmic or systemic benefit.
That's fascinating. It encourages responsibility, generosity, which, can build goodwill, maybe open unexpected doors later on.
Could do. It's a different way of thinking about profit. Now, changing tack slightly, he really emphasizes the long game. Patience.
Ah, yes, the time factor. He says it takes, 5 to 10 years for a business to really mature?
Yeah, somewhere in that range. Which is such an important reality check, especially today when everyone wants instant success. Building something solid just takes time and effort.
Yeah.
Consistently.
Uses the tree analogy, right? Planting a seed.
Exactly. You plant it, you water it, you nurture it, but you have to wait. You don't get fruit on day one, or even year one, usually.
And during that early phase, those first few years, he advises against taking big salaries.
Right. The focus has got to be reinvesting profits back in, strengthening the roots, letting the business establish itself before you start expecting big personal returns.
You can see how this links back to why some businesses, maybe especially in tougher economic areas like the ghetto context he mentions, might struggle to really grow.
Absolutely. If the pressure is always on immediate survival, taking money out now to pay bills,
Then there's nothing left to reinvest for later, for growth.
it becomes this cycle. Short-term needs constantly trumping long-term potential. And a key tool MUKUVE highlights for breaking that cycle is good old record keeping.
Seems so basic, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But he really stresses it. Document everything. Profits, losses, transactions.
Everything. And it's not just for you, for your own understanding. It builds credibility. Massively.
Well, so, credibility with who?
With potential partners, suppliers, investors, and especially banks. Good records show you're serious, organized, responsible. It builds trust.
Okay, that makes sense. And speaking of growth, he comes back again to reinvesting profits into assets.
It's the recurring theme, isn't it? Because it's the engine. That's how you accelerate growth. Profits shouldn't just be seen as income to take home. They're fuel for buying more things that will generate even more income down the line.
Fuel for the engine. I like that.
And that leads straight into building legitimacy and getting access to capital, which is, often the big hurdle.
Right. How do you get funding to expand?
Well, first, MUKUVE says, pay your taxes, be legitimate, fulfill your obligations. But then, crucially, build a relationship with a bank.
Okay, how do you do that practically?
Open a proper business bank account. And then, this is key, consistently deposit your profits into it. Don't just keep cash under the mattress, so to speak.
Why is depositing so important?
Because it creates a paper trail, a verifiable financial history for your business. It shows the bank that money is actually flowing through, that the business is real and active. That builds your creditworthiness.
So that's how you build a track record.
Exactly. And it's that track record, that credit history, that eventually allows you to access loans, overdrafts, other finance you might need to really scale up.
Whereas if you don't bank the money,
you're essentially invisible to the financial system. You have no proof of income, no history. Getting a loan becomes incredibly difficult, maybe impossible. It really holds businesses back.
So let's try and pull together the key success factors he's laying out, it sounds like. Number one, financial education, really understanding the numbers.
Definitely. Then controlling that cash flow, making sure more comes in than goes out.
Saving and investing strategically, especially when times are good.
Building multiple income streams so you're not reliant on just one thing.
Having that long-term vision, thinking 5, 10 years ahead.
Discipline in everything, but especially finances.
Meticulous record keeping, knowing your figures inside out.
Consistently reinvesting profits back into income-generating assets.
Paying your taxes, being above board.
And actively building that relationship with your bank, establishing that credit history. It's quite a list.
It is a comprehensive blueprint. And he doesn't just talk about the financial stuff, does he?
No, he also brings in things like, sheer hard work. Building a good team around you, you can't do it alone.
Mentorship too, right? Learning from people who've been there.
Absolutely. Seeking out wisdom and continuous learning, going to seminars, reading, staying curious, not trying to operate in a vacuum, building your network.
It comes back to that wilderness idea he uses, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You need the skills, the preparation, the tools before you venture out into the tough terrain of building a business.
Precisely. You need to be equipped for the journey, the highs and the lows.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive into MUKOV's insights, what are the really crucial takeaways for you listening right now?
Well, we've seen how vital it is to get a real grip on your finances, your cash flow.
Yeah, and to actively build assets that make money rather than just, spending everything.
Saving for those inevitable downturns, diversifying your income.
And remembering to reinvest profits for growth. Plus, getting legitimate records, taxes, banking, that seems key.
Absolutely paramount. And maybe underlying it all is that need for a long view, patience. Understanding it's a marathon, not a sprint.
It really demands perseverance, doesn't it? Sticking with it, learning, adapting, reinvesting. Yeah. So here's something to think about. Reflecting on all these principles, what's maybe one specific concrete change you can make, maybe starting today, in how you manage your business finances? Or even your personal ones if you're just starting to think about a business.
Could it be finally starting to track every single expense? Or maybe taking that first step to open a separate business savings account.
Or perhaps identifying someone who can be a mentor and actually reaching out.
Lots to consider.
Definitely. We really hope this gives you some food for thought. Take these ideas, see how they fit your own situation, your own aspirations. And, if something really sparked your interest, dig deeper. There's always more to learn.
So, we give it so much power, this thing we call money. It's kind of amazing when you think about it.
Yeah, but where does that power, truly come from? That's the big question, isn't it?
Exactly. And today we're diving into some really thought-provoking ideas from a source called Chapter 4, Business in the Ghetto by EKMUKVE.
Okay.
Our goal, really try to get our heads around the fundamental nature of money, how it's changed, and what that means for how we work and live today.
And this source looks at it in a pretty unique way, right? Like money having different layers.
Yeah, almost like dimensions. It talks about Spirit calls it mammon, then value, like market forces, a soul tied to obedience, currency as the body, and then the physical paper stuff we actually handle.
Okay, wow. So starting with that idea of spirit or mammon, where does the source take that?
Well, right away it connects back to the very beginnings. The source suggests our need to work, what it actually calls the sin of labor.
It's a sin of labor. Okay.
Yeah. It suggests that wasn't how things were originally meant to be. It was a consequence of, disobedience.
Huh. So that frames our whole relationship with earning and value very differently from the get-go.
It really does. Before paychecks and all that, the source says it was basically about what you could do. Skills, bartering.
My skills were your currency.
Right. If you build good houses, you trade that skill. Pretty direct exchange, isn't it?
Makes sense. Simple. Then gold came along.
Then gold, yeah. Something everyone sort of agreed had value. And then came the promises to pay in gold those early paper notes.
Okay, the promissory notes. Backed by something real.
Exactly. And that shift, paper backed by gold, was huge. But the source really flags 1971.
Ah, yeah. Nixon shock. When the U.S. dollar was untied from gold.
Right. And the source emphasizes that break. Suddenly, the value of our money became less about, a lump of gold somewhere.
And more about
Yeah.
just trust. Trust in the government, the system.
Pretty much. Trust in the system itself. It gave flexibility, sure, but it also opened up, different ways value is seen.
And that's where it gets even more intriguing with this mammon idea you mentioned.
Yeah, this is where it gets really deep. The source introduces mammon as almost like the driving force behind money. Like it's not neutral.
The god behind money is a phrase sometimes used.
And the source even says everyone today is a slave to money, which, wow, that makes you stop and think, right?
It absolutely does. So if mammon is this force, what does that imply about our priorities? What we chase?
Well, the source argues that the value soul of money gets dictated by market demand. It's almost like obeying Mammon's law.
Meaning?
Like if everyone suddenly desperately wants, tulips.
Or meme stocks.
Right. Their perceived value just shoots up, doesn't matter what they're inherently worth. Our collective desire fuels the value. It's driven by that demand.
Okay, I see. It's the market obeying this force.
Which kind of leads to the next point. Currency is meant to move. The source is really clear. Money is a tool to be used, not to be worshipped.
So hoarding it is.
Yeah.
Missing the point.
Yeah. According to this view, yeah. Money just sitting there isn't fulfilling its purpose. It's like water, Needs to flow to be useful.
That makes sense. A tool, not an idol. And the source looks at why people feel trapped, right? Working for money instead of the other way around.
Exactly. It suggests that sometimes systems, even academic education, can unintentionally steer people towards just earning.
Instead of building real, lasting financial stability.
Yeah. Paths that prioritize the paycheck over, say, building something for yourself.
Okay, and this ties into that scriptural order you mentioned earlier.
It does. The source lays out this order. First, outdoor work. Basically, get a job, learn skills, understand the grind.
Okay, step one, get your hands dirty, so to speak.
Then creating a field. This means buying assets, things that can generate income for you.
So not just working, but acquiring things that work for you, assets.
Right. And only then, finally, building a house, which represents the luxury, the comforts.
That's kind of the reverse of what many people do, isn't it? Graduate, get the big mortgage, then work like crazy to pay for it.
That's the contrast the source draws. Instead of the new grad immediately taking on huge debt for a house, maybe focus on building skills or starting a side business first. That's the field.
Build the income stream before the big expense. Have your money start working for you. Makes sense.
And finally, it briefly touches on protecting what you build.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
The practical stuff. Paying your taxes, getting insurance, even life insurance to protect a business brand if something happens to the owner.
Yeah.
Guarding your field.
Right. Securing the assets you've built. Practical advice.
So yeah, to wrap it up, this deep dive gives us a view of money that's, evolved dramatically.
Definitely. From skills to gold to, trust and market forces.
And driven by forces we might not always think about, like this mammon concept, it really pushes you to see money as a tool.
Something that should serve us, ideally, not the other way around.
And it offers this alternative path for building financial security assets first, luxuries later.
A different sequence to consider.
So here's a final thought for you listening. Maybe take a moment. Consider your own relationship with money. Is it really working for you, or do you feel like you're mostly working for it?
And maybe ask yourself, what's one small field, one potential income-generating asset, however small, could you perhaps start planting today?